He called me ugly in a packed restaurant, then he left me to pay. Here's what happened. Hi. I'm Jessica Carter, 30 years old, art director at a small design studio, daughter of Mark and Linda Carter and Emily's younger sister. Before anyone says, oh, not her again, yes, I'm the one people always said was easygoing and naturally talented. Growing up, the family leaned into the narrative. Emily paid her own way, worked like a machine, bought a house. I got the spotlight for winning art contests and making everything look effortless. That dynamic shaped me in invisible ways. I learned to be likable and light, to charm instead of argue. Felt safer. I want the record to be clear. Being the favored kid didn't mean my life was perfect. It meant that when things got messy, people expected me to smile and smooth things over. I learned to minimize conflict, to avoid heavy talk about money or demands because being pleasant kept tensions low. I didn't resent Emily, I idolized her grit, but I never fully trusted applause that came easier than the sweat it took to get there. My love life? Long story short, pattern repeat. I date men who loved my laugh and my Instagram-ready aesthetics but didn't love my edges. Tyler Walker seemed different at first. He was warm, worked in tech, liked obscure vinyl records, and made jokes that landed in a way that felt like we had our own language. Our friends, Brandon, Kyle, and Megan, fit into his orbit, loud, performative, the kind who enjoyed one-upmanship. For months, Tyler was the version of him who wanted to build a life with me. He texted about future travel, we talked about a dog, he kissed me like he meant it. So when he suggested we go to the Willow, the expensive restaurant downtown with dim lighting and the candles that wobble artistically, I said yes without thinking. I wanted romance. I wanted to be the protagonist of my own scene for once. I also didn't realize that what I wanted and what Tyler needed to prove to his friends were different things entirely. The next few hours unraveled into something ugly in public, and that night changed how I saw myself, my family, and the way people cheer for those they think have it all. Tyler had a charm professionals would probably categorize as calculated warmth. He could flatter a room and then disappear when it was time to hold space for someone else. Early in our relationship, it felt like a gift. He remembered small details, the subtitle of a book I'd skimmed in college, the designer of a vintage chair I loved, the name of a dish I made once. He'd show up with coffee and a ridiculous bouquet from a corner florist. There was depth there, but there were also shadows. He'd deflect when I brought up hard topics, and sometimes humor in his voice carried a cutting edge that made me laugh despite the sting. Most couples have quirks. Ours were that he loved jests at expense and I loved being the one who didn't take herself too seriously. That combo works until it doesn't. My friends warned me once. Megan, my roommate of 5 years, murmured, "He's great at parties, but does he do the hard stuff?" I shrugged because I didn't want to be the doomsayer. 29, you want to believe the person who opens the door for you is also the one who will carry the boxes when the elevator is broken. I wanted to believe Tyler would be the anchor. The thing about people like Tyler is they can escalate performance to protect ego. With his friends around, he was louder, cleverer, a little more daring. The dynamic with Brandon and Kyle was competitive in a performative way. Every quip escalated into a one-up. I saw it once at a barbecue where Tyler framed an old anecdote about me that, in hindsight, was designed for laughs at my expense. I laughed then because that's what I'd learned to do. It didn't occur to me that those tiny cuts would compound into something that night at the Willow. He'd been texting me all week about this date. "Make it a night," he said. I got dressed in a dress I'd bought for an art opening last year, and that made me feel grown up. I did my hair like someone in a movie, curled loosely and let a few wisps escape. I wanted to look like someone who'd made choices and held herself together. I just didn't expect that in front of people he'd choose to make me small. The Willow was everything Instagram promised and everything my bank account silently judged. Candlelight, linen napkins, waiters who glide like they're in a perpetual rehearsal. Tyler was in his element. Brandon and Kyle were already there when we arrived, 2 mugs of confidence that never cooled. They greeted us like a set, mock hugs, low-five theatrics, the kind of performance where masculinity is scored in decibels. Megan sat at the end with polite smiles, and I found myself suddenly aware of the choreography happening around me. For the first course, Tyler was attentive. He ordered something I'd never try, made a joke about my distaste for truffle oil that landed as a laugh in the table's chorus. Felt normal until Kyle started egging him on. Kyle had been ribbing me about being a high-maintenance artsy type, a joke in his orbit, and Tyler, laughing along, made that pivot that's easy to miss until it's a dart. "Yeah, Jess always looks so cute, but sometimes she's kind of, well, not pretty when she's mad, right?" Table snickered. Felt like the air changed. There's a difference between playful teasing and a punch aimed where someone is vulnerable. In that instant, my chest tightened. I tried to laugh it off. I tried to let the joke sit like an awkward spice and pass. But the seed was planted. Tyler kept pushing, baited by the applause of his friends. He asked a question, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Aren't you going to say something, Jess? Come on." I gave a tight smile that did not reach my eyes. Later, when the main course came, Tyler made the crack I still replay. Under his breath, except not quiet enough, he said, "You're kinda ugly when you're trying too hard." Cut in an odd, vertiginous way because he didn't say it in anger. He said it like a punchline. And because the restaurant was full of people who loved the sound of clever cruelty, a few new laughs joined in. My face warmed and then iced. I felt like an audience member in my own life, watching someone take a mic and aim it at me. I sat there, fork hovering over overpriced risotto, and felt something quietly collapse. The thing about humiliation in public is not just the words, it's the rearrangement of the room. People reorient. Conversations dip. The waiter suddenly pretends that he's unaware of the awkwardness he just witnessed. Tyler kept smiling like he'd landed a perfect note. Brandon clapped him on the back. Kyle filmed a snippet and joked about making it into a highlight reel. My brain flailed between defending myself and not wanting to make the scene worse. I tried to pull the conversation back to safety. "That's not funny," I said softly, because squealing arguments in a restaurant make me want to sink through the floor. He laughed, said, "Babe, lighten up." I felt the old habit, smooth over, take responsibility for others' comfort, kick in. I laughed a tight, brittle laugh and tried to redirect to the menu. Inside, a small, cold rebellion began to gather. Then came the part people seemed to obsess over, the bill. We'd ordered like fools, thinking the night was about romance. I didn't notice the way Tyler and his friends had stacked the order to show off. Oysters, bottles of wine, an appetizer that was labeled Chef's Extravagance. When the check arrived, Tyler reached for his wallet, made a show of flipping through cards, and then, to my astonishment, said with that theatrical nonchalance he'd perfected, "Oh shoot, I forgot my card in the car. Jess, could you cover this? I'll Venmo you." Table tittered. I froze. It wasn't the forgetting, we've all had the card in the car thing. It was the way his friends looked at me like the evening's last gag. Watch Jess bail us out. I felt my stomach drop, but I also felt every old lesson of mine nudging me. Be agreeable, step up, keep the peace. I found myself reaching for my purse before my better instincts could protest. I'd learned the cost of confrontation. I'd learned to pay to keep the air calm. That night, I paid an amount that would have covered half my month's rent without blinking. When I left the restaurant carrying the weight of humiliation and a crumpled receipt, Tyler walked to his car with a casualness that felt like a final insult. He didn't apologize. He didn't call me an hour later. He'd gotten his laugh and left me with the bill and a story that would not be contained to our table. What I didn't know then was that Kyle's little phone shot had more life than the night. He'd filmed Tyler's barbed line and posted it to a private group with the caption, "Watch Tyler roast his girl, savage." Somebody in that group saved it, uploaded it, and within 24 hours the snippet was everywhere. Co-workers, friends of friends, strangers who loved a spectacle. Social media distilled the scene into a one-line story. Guy calls girlfriend ugly and leaves her to pay. No nuance. No context. Just the perfect bite for moral outrage and late-night commentary. My phone started buzzing in a way I'd never experienced. Messages came fast, some supportive like Megan's "I'm so sorry, come home," and others weirdly performative. A guy from college sending laughing emojis as if he'd been robbed of entertainment. The worst was the DM from a woman I hadn't spoken to since middle school. "I always thought you had it easy." It slotted into the old family narrative of me being the golden child, but now under a new light. "You looked put together, so clearly you must be fragile." At work, people stopped me in the hall. Some whispered condolences, others made light jokes about the relationship roast like it was a Netflix special. I felt naked in my skin. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the violation of watching a private moment turned performative currency. I'd paid for the bill, and now I was paying again, with the privacy of my dignity. My parents called. Mom's voice wavered between sympathy and the awkward parental tendency to suggest compromise. "Did you guys talk it through?" Sometimes boys don't know how to be sensitive. Emily's message was different. "You okay? Don't let that define you." Her words calmed me in a way I hadn't expected. She's the sister who's been through worse public storms and still finds a way to be pragmatic and kind. But even her message had an edge of worry. "People will talk." That sentence felt like a premonition. I sat on my living room floor scrolling through comments, finding strangers' judgments gilded with righteous fury and casual cruelty. I felt the practiced urge to delete, to disappear. Instead, after a long night of tears and a lot of soup, I wrote a short note to myself. You are more than their clip. I didn't post it. I wasn't ready. But writing it anchored me. When the clip went semi-viral, family dynamics that had been tenuous suddenly trained themselves on me like spotlights. My parents called more often than usual. Dad sounded hollow, like someone who'd seen a personal brand of humiliation play in slow motion. Mom oscillated between anger on my behalf and the old habit of smoothing things over with platitudes. Emily, bless her, took a different tack. She drove over with a bag of groceries and a quiet presence that made the world feel manageable. She was the one who sat with me while I parsed through feelings that were both childish and adult, embarrassment, betrayal, and that prickly anger that tastes like a promise. You paid? She asked gently. When I nodded, she said, You didn't have to. But you did what felt right in the moment. Emily's voice made me remember that my pattern of smoothing things over came from a complicated mixture of fear and conditioning. Her presence was a mirror. She had learned to set boundaries in her own life the hard way, and she wanted me to understand that kindness is not the same as acquiescence. Then came the harder, angrier angle. A cousin texted a screenshot with the caption, Is this true? Jess, we're worried. Worry morphs quickly into judgment among relatives. It's a social reflex. The message made me feel like an exhibit in a family spectacle. I answered as honestly as I could. Yes. He said cruel things. I paid the bill. I'm okay. The replies were a smattering of sympathy wrapped in the parental logic of, maybe you could have handled it differently. As if victimhood requires a performance of perfect reaction. Perhaps the more painful crack came from someone I never expected. Tyler's apology, public and performative, posted to his Instagram the day after, where he claimed miscommunication and alcohol and called me amazing. Comments exploded with takes. Some scolded him for being a jerk, others prayed for reconciliation. I watched it all and felt nothing but a cool, detached clarity. His apology was less about me and more about reputation control. That realization hurt in a different way because it stripped the incident of romance and left it a PR maneuver. Strange to grieve the idea of someone you loved while simultaneously seeing their behavior for what it was. I grieved the version of Tyler who might have been kind, and I grieved the version of myself who'd forgive too easily. Those two losses sat together like heavy, matching luggage I had to carry while deciding how to travel forward. Something else happened in the weeks that followed. Social triage. People pick sides in all kinds of ways, quietly and not so quietly. Megan, my roommate and my oldest friend, was steadfast. She came over with casserole and her famous thermos of terrible TV romance shows. She sat with me on the couch and let me cry without pressing for a plan. Leah from work brought over a bottle of cheap wine and a notepad, and together we drafted a list of boundaries. What kinds of contact I'd accept from Tyler when, if ever, I'd attend the places we used to go as a couple, and how to respond when mutual friends tried to mediate. Then there were the fair weather people. Brandon and Kyle, for a stretch, pretended like nothing had happened. Jokes and inside remarks in group chats that turned my humiliation into fodder. They sent me memes and t-shirts that were supposed to be ironic but felt like salt. I wrote a long, calm message, something I'd rehearsed countless times in my head, asking them not to post those things and explaining how the joke hurt. Brandon replied with a curt, "You're too sensitive." Kyle called me dramatic in a group chat as if their performance was the more authentic truth. What surprised me wasn't the people who left. It was the strangers who emerged from the internet's underbrush with kindness. An old college classmate offering to take me to a gallery, a woman who DM'd to say she'd been through something similar and would love to lend an ear. Contrast between performative cruelty and quiet, unexpected support made me think about what people are willing to lose for a laugh and what they'll risk for connection. As for Tyler, he reached out a few times. The messages were polite, confusing, and oddly defensive. "Can we talk?" he asked. I messed up. My therapist at the time, a woman named Dr. Ari, advised caution. People apologize for different reasons, she said. Decide if the apology is for you or for the audience. That question echoed as I watched Tyler's comments gather likes and sympathetic hearts. The world had made me a public specimen of humiliation, and I was learning slowly and painfully to stop forgiving performative sorrow. One evening, a week after the clip went viral, Tyler came to my building. I let him in because for some reason my chest still hoped for repair. He wanted to talk, face to face, no cameras, no group. I agreed because I wanted closure more than I wanted drama. For the first 10 minutes, his posture was contrite. He said the right words. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." I got carried away. I listened. I wanted to believe. Then he asked me quietly to take down any mention of the clip from my social profiles. He said, "This is bad for me. People keep sending it to my work. I don't want my team to see this." I stared at him. In his asking, there was an expectation baked into tone. He wanted me to perform forgiveness as a favor to his reputation. Felt like being asked to erase my hurt for the convenience of his career. I told him no. Not in a dramatic way, something firmer, plain. "I won't delete truth because you dislike the consequences," I said. "If you're sorry, do something meaningful about it." He looked wounded, then annoyed. The theater of apology can be short-circuited by a request for accountability. He asked for one more chance in the kind of earnest voice used in rom-coms. I imagined the scene that would come next. Everyone hugging like nothing happened, my dignity smoothed away in exchange for a lukewarm reconciliation. So I did something else. I posted. Not an angry diatribe, but a calm recounting of that night in fuller detail than the clip had allowed. I framed it as my experience rather than an indictment. I wrote about the jokes, the way the bill was left to me, the small erosion of respect that had piled up. I kept it honest and devoid of weaponizing language. I wanted to control my narrative rather than let the internet do it for me. The reaction was immediate and astonishing. People sent empathy, told similar stories, and shared their own tiny victories in standing up for themselves. Felt like reclaiming a microphone after someone had shouted you down. Tyler's response? He posted a brief apology proofed by friends and HR-friendly phrases. It didn't feel like a real apology. But my post did something else I hadn't expected. It invited real conversation, and that was something neither he nor his viral clip could take away. Therapy became a part of my weekly schedule, not because the internet said I had to, but because I wanted to feel less moved by the slings and more anchored by my own choices. Dr. Ari helped me untangle the old habits, smoothing, minimizing, self-blame. We talked about making space for anger that isn't destructive and for boundaries that feel generous rather than punitive. One exercise became famous to me, naming exactly what you will and won't accept, and repeating it until it loses the tremor of doubt. Around this time, I channeled energy into something less talk and more creation. I curated a small show titled Not Your Punchline, a mixed-media exhibition reclaiming images and phrases used as humiliation and twisting them into statements of resilience. I invited local artists, including some friends who'd supported me through the viral episode. The gallery agreed to host it on a quiet weekday evening, promising to donate a portion of proceeds to a nonprofit that helps people who've experienced public shaming or online harassment. Project wasn't pretentious therapy paint. It was practical. Sculptures that held receipts, like mine from the Willow, prints that overlaid hurtful comments with gold leaf, and a spoken word night where people read micro-essays about moments they were laughed at and how they survived. The night of the show, I stood by the doorway, sweaty-palmed and terrified. People came. They brought friends. They bought prints and left notes on a wall that read, "You are not a clip." The show accomplished two things. First, it made the humiliation feel less solitary. Second, it turned my experience into something that helped others. That night, a woman in the back told me quietly that she'd been shamed by an ex in a video years ago and had carried that shame until she saw the faces in this room. Her hand on my arm felt like permission to be whole in public again. After the show, the narrative shifted again. Some people celebrated my resilience and praised my art. Others criticized me for making a profit off humiliation. Internet logic is a funhouse mirror. Tyler's attempts at reconciliation continued. He posted a long apology on his story that looked like it had been polished by a PR team, heartfelt language but sanitized. He sent a private message asking if we could meet and talk. I said no. A few mutual friends tried to mediate. Brandon approached me with a sheepish look and said, "I'm sorry if I made it worse." I accepted the apology but said plainly that I needed boundaries, not lectures. That line seemed to land with some and anger others who expected performative loyalty to remain intact. The things people expect of friendship are often more about belonging than ethics. There were quieter victories too. My boss commended me for owning my narrative publicly without dragging it unnecessarily. She offered a budget to expand Not Your Punchline into a small traveling show. My parents, after initial clumsy comments and a few awkward dinners, started to show up differently. The mom would ask about the gallery, and Dad would chuckle stiffly about how people can be cruel on the internet. They said the right things, but also started being more conscious in family settings about tone and the old habit of making light of things. Forgiveness is a strange currency. I forgave some things privately because holding them consumed me. I didn't forgive manipulation or minimize what had happened. I forgave the younger version of myself who would have swallowed everything to keep the appearance of harmony. That forgiveness was less about Tyler and more about freeing myself to choose how I wanted to live forward. Months after the clip, Tyler did something that surprised no one and angered some. He tried to make the whole arc about his growth. He posted a long-form essay on mistakes and learning about accountability and how he'd been toxic before. Piece had the hallmarks of performative growth, vague specifics, more about his inner work than about the harm done. People liked it. They commented heart emojis. Some wrote, "We all make mistakes." A handful gushed that he was brave. I felt jaded. Too often apologies in the public eye are a currency used to trade reputation back in. Real accountability to me means sustained action. I responded in a private message that I made public in part, not to punish but to hold the record. I thanked him for the apology and asked to see concrete steps. "Show, don't tell," I wrote. "If you're really committed to growth, do the hard work when no one's watching." He tried to respond by offering to fund a mental health initiative. It read like a donation made with headlines in mind. I declined. I didn't need his money to prove anything. I needed him to understand the contours of power and the aftermath of public humiliation. That nuance is unsexy and sometimes invisible. It requires time, therapy, and a willingness to be smaller for a while so others can see what they did. Meanwhile, my work was gaining traction. Not Your Punchline got picked up by a small magazine, and my art career had a momentum that felt like reclamation. The irony was delicious. The thing that had been used to make me small became the platform that gave me voice. I learned to see that quiet power isn't in getting the last word on someone's Instagram. It's in building projects that help others and living in ways that match your values. Where we are now is messy and hopeful. Tyler and I have a civil, occasional exchange limited to logistics if we run into each other through mutual circles. He reached out once to say he was truly sorry, and I replied that I accept accountability when it's shown, not when it's posted. My family has been learning. Emily and I have a better rhythm. She doesn't overstep with advice, and I don't downplay my needs. Mom has stopped making offhand comments about keeping things light at dinners. She asks direct questions now and listens. The Not Your Punchline project expanded into a small online series where people submit short stories about being publicly shamed and how they reclaimed their narrative. We ran a fundraiser and donated to online harassment resources. That felt right, turning harm into help without commodifying trauma. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. My friendships weathered the storm. Megan is still my roommate. She's the person who knows when to make soup and when to hand me the keys and say, "Go paint." Leah from work is now a co-curator and the woman who texts me ridiculous memes and actual support. Brandon and Kyle? We have polite distance. They sent awkward birthday texts, and I send edited group photos with my smile intact and no expectation of apology theater. I'm dating again in a very different way. Marcus, yes, another American name because apparently I like them, is a teacher who laughs with his whole face and listens even when the topic is boring. He came to the gallery opening and cried in the corner like someone who understood that art is work. He's not a rescue fantasy. He's someone who sees me as whole and messy. That's a different love language and, honestly, a better fit. I still have days when the clip resurfaces and some random account reposts it with snark. I feel a flush, but not the same sinking dread. Now I send a clip of my favorite piece from the show, a small sculpture that holds a crumpled receipt and a note, "You got up?" That's the story I prefer people take away. Date. 9 months after the fiasco at the Willow, life is quieter and fuller in ways I didn't imagine would coexist. The traveling exhibit made one stop in a neighboring city and then another. People came and told stories, and a small community of artists formed around the mission. I launched a short podcast called After the Clip, where we interview people who turned public shaming into projects, support networks, and creative endeavors. Tiny, but it's meaningful. Emily moved in with her boyfriend for a short while, relationship update for those who tracked it, and we held a small dinner where we laughed at old family footage and discussed how we'd both learned boundaries differently. Mom apologized one evening for making light of emotional wounds in the past. It was stilted but real. Dad bought me a ridiculous, over-the-top coffee table as a congratulatory present, and I laughed so hard I cried. Those gestures are small, clumsy, and precious. Marcus and I are still cooking together on Sundays, making ridiculous omelets and plotting a collaborative piece for the next gallery season. The wounds are not fully healed. Sometimes when a new clip surfaces, I get a flash of old shame. But mostly I feel like I'm living a life I chose rather than one edited for someone else's laughter. Tyler faded from my orbit, and to be honest, I don't spend energy thinking about him. He had his social moment and moved on. I had mine, different, slower, and with fewer likes but more depth. That, for me, is the victory. I learned I could be funny and fierce. I learned that paying someone else's bill once doesn't mean you're a doormat. Sometimes it's payment for peace. But peace can be replaced by power. The power to hold your story and tell it on your terms. If you asked me what advice I'd give someone sitting where I sat that night, I'd say 3 things. Keep receipts, literal and emotional. Call a friend who will listen without judging, and create something that turns the hurt into help. It won't erase pain, but it makes space for the next chapter, and that's where the real life begins.